Hi guys, welcome to Real Deal English, brought to you by Open Language, helping you use real English to talk about what's going on in the world right now. Hi, this is Cynthia.
Hey guys, this is Jason. And so today we're going to be talking about television shows. So of course, American TV is very popular, both of course in the United States and also in other countries. But in the last 10 years, it's gotten really good.
Yeah, I've been watching TV. Before, I didn't really watch that much TV.
Yeah, so in the last 10 years, people have been spending a lot more money making these TV shows. And now they're really high quality. They almost look and feel like movies, and they're really, really, really good.
They are really good. They're really well written. And the actors are also really good. They are very good actors.
And now we're at the point that there are too many good TV shows to watch.
Yes.
I feel like every day I'm talking to someone and they say, "Oh, do you watch this TV show?"
Yeah.
And I say, I don't. It's really good. You should watch it. And I say, I just don't have the time. I'm sorry.
Yeah, it's tough. It does take a lot of time to watch these TV shows. I definitely watched the ones we're talking about today. And I've watched a lot of the recent good ones.
And so today, as Cynthia just mentioned, we're going to be talking about two of the most popular television shows in the United States, both of which just premiered.
Yes.
So what does to premiere mean?
It means that it starts again. So we're going to talk about Game of Thrones, and season 4 just premiered. There are 2 episodes already for season 4. And we're also going to talk about Mad Men, and the last season just premiered for Mad Men, which is season 7.
So when we talk about seasons of a TV show, we're talking about all of the episodes from one time. Usually TV shows have a season where for maybe 6, 7, 8 months, they have an episode every week. And then they don't have the TV show for 4 months, 5 months.
Now it's starting to be a year.
A year, really.
Yeah,
1 year without...
For Mad Men, I believe it was a year, and for True Blood, which is a show about vampires.
So a year in between each season.
Yes, they're taking longer breaks now.
Well, that's because they're so good. They take a long time to make.
Yeah, so not every show takes a year off, but some do. So let's talk about Game of Thrones first. Let's talk about the title. So a throne is somewhere where a king or queen sits. It's like a very nice chair. And the Game of Thrones, it's a game. People want to be the rulers of a kingdom. So there are other people who are out to get the king, and they're trying to kill him or her, the king or queen.
Or they're maybe becoming friends with them and then tricking them and then helping them and then
Backstabbing
hurting
them.
Yeah. So it's called the Game of Thrones because that's what happens in this TV show. So Game of Thrones is a fantasy drama about kings and queens and kingdoms and magic. So this first word, fantasy. Cynthia, what's fantasy?
Fantasy shows are shows that have magic or supernatural things in them, like ghosts or witches or something.
Things that aren't real.
Things that aren't real. Things that are made up. They're fictional, made up.
And then drama is something that's serious.
Serious.
So it's not comedy. It's not funny.
No.
People aren't having fun. It's really, really serious. And so in this case, we have a fantasy drama, and it's about, as we mentioned, kings and queens and kingdoms, which is what a king controls. And then, of course, magic. Even though Game of Thrones is fantasy, it sort of looks like the real world, right?
Yeah, it does. Back in the Middle Ages, the European Middle Ages.
So the Middle Ages in Europe were from the year about 800 to the year 1500 about.
Yeah.
So that was a time when there was lots of kings and queens and castles and things like that.
Exactly. And everyone on the show has a British accent, so you can kind of tell that it's from Europe.
Yeah. So it sort of looks like the European Middle Ages, but then, of course, there's magic.
Yeah.
And then we also have dragons.
And there are also places or kingdoms that are not real.
Yeah,
they're,
it's not
they're made
real.
up. They're fake.
Yeah, so made up means that it's not a real thing. They made it for the story, but it sort of looks like places in the real world.
Exactly. Okay, and this Game of Thrones TV show, it originally came from a book, correct? Okay, and this book was called A Song of Ice and Fire by George R.R. Martin.
And the books were a little popular before the TV show was made, but now that the TV show is out, the books are super popular.
Really? Have you read them?
I haven't read them. My family has read all of them.
Oh, really?
And so whenever I'm with my family, they say, "Oh my God, I just read book number 5." And I say, "Stop talking, stop talking. Don't tell me anything." So the big question, of course, is why is this TV show so popular? This TV show right now is the #1 show in America. Everyone in the United States is talking about this show. The first episode of the 4th season just premiered, I think, 1 week ago, 2 weeks ago.
Yeah.
And it had almost 7 million people watching it.
Wow.
Which is a lot.
That's a lot. And every season they get more viewers. So it's becoming increasingly popular. And it's also the second most downloaded torrent show ever in history. Okay, so torrent, this is something that's downloaded online illegally.
Yeah, so this is not legal to do. It is not okay to do this, but lots of people do it. And so the second episode, after it was on TV about a week ago, it was the most downloaded thing ever on a torrent. So why are so many people downloading it and not just watching it on TV?
Well, it's on HBO, and HBO costs a lot of money. So that's why people are downloading it. And for those of us who are abroad, of course, we have to download it.
So HBO is a TV channel.
Exactly.
That it costs extra money. So Cynthia, why do you think this TV show is so popular?
Well, personally, I like fantasy shows, so I would have watched it anyway. But I think the reason a lot of people who typically don't like fantasy shows is because there's a lot of sex and violence.
A lot of sex and a lot of violence.
And and it has a very high production value. So all the things that a show needs to be made a show are very high. Like the sets, they're really nice. They're really expensive. A set is a place where the film or the TV show is filmed. So like a set can be a church, or a set can be the beach. So wherever the movie or the TV show is filmed, that's the set. It's the place where it's filmed.
Yeah, so this word production values is really important when talking about these new TV shows, because they spend so much money on these TV shows, and especially a show like Game of Thrones. I know they aren't just filming the TV show in one place. They're filming, I think, in 5 or 6 different countries.
Yeah, different countries.
And that costs so much money.
Yeah, to travel everywhere and pay for everyone's tickets.
So usually things that have production values that are this high, they're spending so much money on sets, on costumes, on makeup, on special effects. They have magic and ghosts and dragons. Usually things that cost that much money are movies.
Yeah.
But this is a TV show, so there's hours and hours and hours of it. So I think that's a big reason why people like it so much.
I agree.
I think one of the other big reasons is that it's really well written. The dialogue is really good. The story is really good.
Yeah.
It's everyone is killing each other and marrying each other.
You don't expect things to happen either. You don't see something coming. You're like, whoa, that person just died.
Yeah, they always kill main characters. There's a character all the time in the show when there's a main character, all of a sudden they just get killed. And that's it. And everything changes.
Yeah. So it's a very complicated and exciting story.
So you guys are listening to Real Deal English, brought to you by Open Language. If you guys are really serious about learning English, of course you can watch some TV shows, but you need to do a little bit more. You of course have to study. And if you guys go to openlanguage.com or download the Open Language app, you can study hundreds of English lessons, many of which with Cynthia and myself. And when you use the one-word promo code GREATSTART, when you sign up for your monthly premium access, you can get your first month for only 99 cents. So today on Real Deal English, brought to you by Open Language, we're talking about these TV shows, the really popular TV shows in the United States. So we talked about Game of Thrones. What's the other TV show that everyone is talking about right now?
Mad Men. And you don't watch the show, correct?
I've watched it a little bit. I know it. I've seen a few episodes, but I haven't watched everything.
Okay.
Do you watch this TV show?
Yes, I do.
Okay,
I do.
So I'll ask you some questions about this.
Okay. So Mad Men, it's a period drama. So a period, that means that it's set during a specific time period. So it's about what happens during that time period. And the time period that it's set is in the 60s. So the first season was set in 1960, And right now we're at the last season, which is season 7, and that's set in 1969.
So we're in the 1960s in the United States. Where are
Yes.
we in the United States in the show?
Okay, so we're in New York City. Right now, in season 7, we're sort of half in New York and half in California. But the show's title is called Mad Men, and it's called Mad Men because it's about people who are working in the advertising industry, and they're in Madison Avenue in New York City. So that's why they're called Mad Men. And they're also called Mad Men because they're sort of people who have gone crazy. So mad as in crazy, and they're crazy with power and success because they're really successful at being advertisers.
So it's these guys. So in the 1960s in the United States, the country had so much money. There was so much money in the United States, and these people that were working in advertising especially were making tons and tons of money. So these people that were working on Madison Avenue, which is where all the advertising companies were just had so much money and so much power. And so this name has two meanings, right? It's Madison Avenue, Mad Men, but then also they're crazy.
They're crazy.
So it's about these crazy guys and women that are working in advertising. I'm sure they have families and there's stories, but it's about more than that too, right?
So a lot of the show takes place in like a work environment because, of course, they're working on Madison Avenue. But some of the show also takes place in their personal lives. So you get sort of a feel of what the character is like and what they do normally during this time period. And you also get a glimpse of what's happening in history. For example, there was a civil rights movement in the 60s. Or
What was the civil rights movement?
it was when African Americans in the U.S. wanted more rights. They were fighting and protesting for being treated as equals, as Caucasians. So you get sort of glimpses of what's going on throughout history in the 60s.
And I know there were a lot of other social movements in the 1960s. The 1960s was a really important time in the United States. We had the civil rights movement for people that weren't white. I know women's liberation. There was a lot of women that had power for the first time and were going to work and were doing what they wanted to do, not just what men told them to do. I know that gay rights was getting a lot of
Yeah, you see
power.
all of that too in the show.
So the show is
glimpses
sort of
it.
The show is about a lot of that. I know also the Vietnam War was happening in the
Yes,
1960s.
yes,
So they
yes.
talk about that
They
in the TV show
They
too.
do have a few episodes where they mention that. And they mention people's attitudes towards the Vietnam War.
So it's about history and the social history and also about the big political events too.
Exactly.
Of course, in the 1960s, President Kennedy was killed. And they talked about that in the show
They had
too.
a whole episode about that and how everyone was just really sad. And I've talked to people who lived during that time period, and they're like, that's exactly what it was like. People really loved him, and people really did cry when he died.
So, Cynthia, why do you like this show?
Well, I like it because I like learning about that time in history. It's a really interesting time because a lot of things are changing, and it's a very different time period too from what it's like now. It's not at all like what it is now. Now we're a lot more liberal. We are open-minded with women and gays and African Americans. But back then, it wasn't like that.
Yeah,
at
it
all.
was when all those things were changing, and they were changing really fast all at
Exactly.
one time. I know my parents watch this TV show, and when I ask them about it, they say they like watching it because it shows what the world was really like then. And as we mentioned, it was so different in the 1960s from how it is today in the United States. And there are so many things from their childhood when my parents were little kids in the 1960s that the TV show shows.
Yeah,
And
I
that people
agree.
think is really interesting to think, oh my God, things used to be like that, and they aren't like that anymore.
That's why for me, for season 1, it was a little hard to get past that season and get into the show because season 1 was just very different from what life is like now. As a woman, I didn't really like the show because it was really sexist. But then
What is sexist?
sexist is when you discriminate or you don't give a person of a different sex, female mainly, opportunities that you would a male. So I didn't like that about the show. It showed sort of that male point of view where the male was, the leader and he could do whatever he wanted. But then they started changing that and they showed the changes. So that's when I started getting a little more into it.
That's sort of the point of the show. That's what things were like in the 1960s in the United States. I know another big reason why the show is so popular is that it's very stylish. That in The Office in the 1960s in New York City in Manhattan, all the men wore these really beautiful suits, and all the women wore these really beautiful clothes, and everyone sat around smoking all day,
and drinking
all day, and that people look at it now and think, oh, that was very stylish. Maybe people were really sexist and really bad in that way, but they looked really good.
They did. They really did. It looked like everyone took their time to get ready in the morning. Like they would wake up 2 hours early just to put on makeup. Even the men would do their hair. People don't do that.
People don't do that anymore. People just come out of bed and come to work.
Yes, that's very true.
And so I know because of this, Mad Men has become a really big influence in fashion. That men in the United States are getting really interested in classic suits again. And that 1960s style is becoming popular in part because of Mad Men.
Well, another reason I think people watch the show, or at least women, is because Don Draper, who is portrayed by Jon Hamm, the actor, he's really hot. He's a very good-looking man, and he wears that suit well.
Okay, so you have some very good-looking people in the show that probably help out a little bit too. I think an interesting thing with this show, though, is that it's very influential. It has lots of influence in American culture, but it's not as popular as Game of Thrones.
Yeah, you're right. It's not as popular, and I think it might be because not everyone is interested in learning about that specific time period. Not everyone wants to watch a show and learn something new. Some people just want to watch a show and do nothing, not really think,
And Game of Thrones has a lot of action and a lot of violence, and that's sometimes more fun to watch than people sitting in an office talking.
Dealing with real life issues.
Yeah, people want to escape a little bit from real life.
Yeah, they do. That's true. If you guys really like this show, then try finding some more of our shows so that you can learn English. We have tons of real deal English shows on iTunes, so please check them out. And if you really like this lesson or know someone who might like this lesson, please share it with them. Thanks for listening. Goodbye.
See you guys.